Hi, welcome to One Eye on the Page. I am Scott. It is the weekly wrap up for the week of 30th October through the 5th of November. Let's go ahead and get started. I finished 7 books this week. To be fair, 5 of those books were pretty much under 200 pages, but I did finish 7 books. I'm not going to go in the order that I finished them for a specific reason, which I will get to later in the video, but for now I will start with the only physical book that I read this week, which is Candles Burning by Tabitha King and Michael McDowell. This is a novel that was written by Michael McDowell, or at least partially written before his death in 1999, with the permission of his family. Tabitha King finished it up. I have read the Blackwater Saga by Michael McDowell before. I haven't read anything else of his, and I've read several books by Tabitha King, including Pearl and One on One, which is one of my favorite romances. After I read this, I looked at quite a few reviews, and some people say that they feel that McDowell did a good job through his part. And to be completely honest, I do not know which part is done by which person. If McDowell wrote the first part, however long that is, and Tabitha King finished up, or how much, for all I know, McDowell could have wrote the first part and the last part, or I don't know his writing process. I will say that I don't think the blame for this novel, and yes, I will say blame, goes to any one author. This novel, which was, I forget how long it was, so about 426 pages, it dragged so badly. It took forever to get where it was going, and it spent so much time basically going, hey, everybody hates this little girl. Did we let you know everybody hates this little girl? Her family doesn't like her at all. Her mom hates her, grandmother hates her, brother doesn't like her. Uh, Her dad likes her, so he's going to be killed horribly. Not a big spoiler. You know that on the first page that he dies. And a lot of it is that it I almost feel it would have been written better as a coming of age story, because it is a horror, supernatural type of story. But like I said, it just takes forever to get to the point, and then it pretty much, we are with Callie, Calliope, at the age of 7, basically 75% of the book at least, and then go from 7 to like she's a teenager to she's a young adult in the last section. And the resolution of the book is just like, that was it was basically, we resolved this off camera, and this is how it turned out. I couldn't stand almost every character in here. Honestly, even Callie, who I kind of liked, that sometimes I was just like, I'm just tired of reading about her. I'm tired of her mother. And yeah, this one, so 2.5 stars for Candles Burning. The next book is not just one book, it is 3 books. It is the collected short stories of Guy de Maupassant, volumes 11, 12, and 13. I am finished with the short stories of Guy de Maupassant. Kind of went out with a whimper rather than a bang. To be fair, and I haven't verified this, but I'm assuming, based on how the stories have gone, these were written near the end of his career, or at least the end of his writing, because it seems like I believe he died in 1893 or possibly four, and I think the last of his stories were like in 1890. The man had syphilis, which could have been congenital or uh, gotten another way, and he also tried to unalive himself at one point, but it was the syphilis that got him. So his, okay, I'm gonna put you over here, okay? So the stories kind of, I think, dip in quality a little bit. They also get a little bit repetitious. There's at least one story that is almost just a retelling of another story, except it switches the gender, and it, instead of having a woman have an illicit affair, it has a man take care of the pesky problem of having a child when he wants to marry somebody else. But it's also a sort of confession. One is a confession, and another is information that is found in letters after the death. I won't go too much into the stories that is in these three books. I will say one video that I'm looking to do sometime in the future is I'm going to basically, rather than 13 volumes, I'm just going to give the stories that should be put into one mega volume. It's 50 short stories. The man wrote about 300 short stories. So I pick 50, one huge volume or two really long volumes. Some of the stories are fairly short, but there's also a novella in there. And I've already gone through the volumes and picked the stories that I feel are worthy to be in this collection. And let me point out, these are my Guy Maupassant is kind of a naturalistic writer, and he writes about the basically the fact that life sucks, and you get that picture in each story, and that may work for other people. To me, it's just like this farmer had a horrible little life. His wife cheated on him. His cow died. The end. Oh, and this story was told by somebody else 20 years after the farmer died. And to me, that just doesn't do it for me. It may for you, but the stories that I pick, there are a few that kind of fit into that, but I also like, if I feel like stories are kind of being a little bit repetitious, I didn't pick them. But I will point out in these three volumes, and I'm looking, and I'm not wearing my glasses because I don't like the glare when I do it, but I'm looking on my monitor over here, and I can't tell you the titles from where I'm looking because it's about 3 feet away. But in volume 11, I picked four stories. In volume 12, I picked three stories. And in volume 13, I picked one story to put in this collection. So overall, these three are not great. There are there's 8 stories out of, I would say, in these three books, 45 or 50, because there are a lot of short stories. So I know at least one of the volumes has 15 stories and the other one has like 17 or 18. I can't remember what the other one, but saying 45, let's say 45 stories. I picked 8 that were good. And the ones that I didn't think were good, there were fewer that were eh, and more that are like, no, this is just bad, and it's just becoming almost parody of his stories. So I am glad that I have read his stories. Like I said, I picked 50 stories. 50 stories from one writer is pretty good. It just happens that he wrote 300 short stories. So I like his short stories. I just don't like all of them. But if I like a writer's 50 stories, pretty good. But for the books themselves, volume 11, 3 stars. Volume 12, 2.5 stars. And volume 13, 2 stars. Just not a good way to end it. I have mentioned before that he has written novels. He has apparently written 6 novels, and he's also written some travel books. I'm definitely not going to read the travel books because, one, I don't know that they would be available. Two, they're written like 150 years ago. I don't know how much good they would do for me. I'm not enough of a history or geography buff that I think it would do anything for me. I don't plan to read his novels, but never say never. It may come up. So I finished 3 other novels this week, and I will talk to you a little bit about them now. I'm not going to get too much into them because I am actually doing another video about them, and I can tell you about it now because it was that I was going to read 5 books, and I've already read 3 of them, and I feel comfortable. Yes, I will finish the 2 other books. What I'm doing is I'm going to be reading or have read extreme horror books, which, I mean, if you know, uh, I may not be the person that you would think would be reading extreme horror, and I'm not. I have read 1 book before in my life that I think would qualify as extreme horror. Not that I thought it was extreme horror, that I knew it was extreme horror. It's just when I was doing research for this book came up, and it's like, oh yeah, I read that a long time ago, and it was oh I forget. It's a Jack Ketchum book. I picked 5 books somewhat at random. I picked one that was in a list of top 10 best extreme horror books. And then the other 4 I picked on Kindle Unlimited. I did a search, 4 stars and above. So hopefully, people who read extreme horror books like these books. So I was like, I'll do those. The 3 books that I have finished are Dead Inside by Chandler Morrison, and I have to Widow. I always get this name mixed up. Widow by Ash Ericmore because it makes more sense to me that the name would be Eric Ashmore, but it is Ash Ericmore. And one that I just finished today, Clown Hunt by Judith Sonnet. Sonnet. I'm going to say Sonnet, and I apologize if that's not how you pronounce it. So, again, I'm going to be doing a video about extreme horror itself, but Dead Inside is about a security guard who works at a hospital. There's a morgue in the hospital. He likes dead girls. I'll leave it at that. He meets a doctor there who works in the maternity ward. She's a cannibal. I will let you connect the dots there. Honestly, at the beginning, even though a lot of the stuff that they do is graphic, it isn't written graphic. And I went through this and I'm like, well, this is nothing. This is supposed to be extreme. It changes. It gets very extreme later. It basically holds back on the extreme a little bit and then it just hammers you in the face with it. I happen to be, because I'm like, this is an extreme, happen to be reading a certain scene while I was eating dinner. That was a mistake. I would say all three novels that I've read so far, all three of them are about 200 pages or a little bit less. All of them would have benefited from being longer. Uh, just a little bit more explanation into things. But I will say, what I do like about this novel is it's about connections and about people trying to connect and people who have a need for connection but don't want to. And despite the fact that this is a very graphic book, especially in the latter half of the novel, I enjoyed the journey. Not a book I think that I will read again, but I did enjoy seeing inside the mind of these two characters, because even though it's told from the security guard's point of view, I think we get a little bit into Helen's point of view. Helen does these horrible things, but she wants to still fit in society, whereas the security guard, he's a little edge lord taken up a notch, but he's like, no, I'm beyond normal people kind of thing. I am going to give this one a 3.5 star. It's yeah. So next I read Widow by Ash Ericmore. It's somebody is attacking men and doing things to them like cutting off their arms or cutting off the arm and leg on one side, or making them basically just a torso and a head, and they are still alive at the moment. And we get multiple points of views from a husband and a wife, the husband's mistress, a young woman searching for her father, and a little bit some of the victims of whoever is performing surgery basically on these men. I will say this is not extreme horror. There's really nothing graphic in here. There is stuff that would feel horribly graphic if done to you or me, but the description of it is no more graphic than what I've read in some fairly tame horror stories. I didn't really like the novel. Didn't really get in depth with any of the characters. There was one character I liked, and even though that character had things kind of flip on from what I was first expecting of them, I still liked it. I just don't think there was much explanation. It was almost like I'm just going to do this to be graphic, but then it wasn't even graphic. Also, and I read this on Kindle. I read it on Kindle Unlimited, so I didn't pay for the book because I pay for Kindle Unlimited. But the grammatical errors in this were horrible, horrible. There were some errors in the Clown Hunt, but not many. I don't recall any in Dead Inside. There may have been, but I didn't note any. But I noted them pretty much on every page with this one, so that affected it too. And also motivation. There is some mention of motivation for different characters in here, but again, I think this is another one where the book should have been expanded a little bit. get me into the characters. It's like, okay, fine, you're extreme horror. You got these supposedly graphic scenes, but if I'm going to feel horror rather than just blah, I need to feel something about the characters, and these characters just weren't people to me. Whereas even the people in Dead Inside who were doing some really horrible things, it's like I could kind of see what makes them tick. And whereas I didn't like them, I could connect with their need for connection or their disdain for connection or their discomfort in situations. I just didn't feel anything like that in this novel. 2 stars, and I think that's being a little bit generous. The last book I read this week, I have 2 more books that I'm going to be reading for the Extreme Horror video, is Clown Hunt. It's pretty much what the story says. It's a clown hunt. The clowns are not the ones doing the hunting. The ones that are being hunted are clowns, except they're not really clowns. They're dressed as clowns or somewhat like clowns. I'm going to be real honest with you. I started this novel probably it's a little bit over 200 pages, but part of that's an afterword, so it's like 197 pages, I think. Probably the first half of it, I was going, "Oh, this one's it's not going to be a 5 star, but it may be a 4.5 star." I do not feel it was a 4.5 star. I think it lost its way a little bit once the actual clown hunt started, and not because it's graphic, because there's a very graphic scene in the prologue, super graphic, and it, it may be the most graphic part of the book. There's a lot of graphic stuff later. No, I'm thinking of a scene later that's I would say is more graphic than that. But that first scene, very graphic, particularly with at least 2 characters, although really a little bit with other ones too. It's like the author made me care about these characters. It made me care about what happened to them. And there are other characters also who aren't gone into too in depth, but I still was able to connect with them so that if and when something bad did happen to them, I felt bad for them. I felt horror for them. This book did that for me. The problem I have with the book in the latter half, I have no problem at all with the mechanics of the clown hunt and what happened to people in there. I will say, one, if you're going to read this, be aware that there are children deaths in it. I will say some of the children in there I felt perfectly comfortable within the concept of a novel what happened to them. Other children, I'm like, you're just having that happen to a child because it's extreme horror. There's no reason for it to be a child. There are children who were not dressed as clowns. They just happened to be near somebody who was. Which, and I don't want to get too in depth into it because if I do, I spoil stuff for you. But there's a reason why these clowns are being hunted. I don't think that there's no real explanation why there are other people besides the clowns being hunted, except this is extreme horror. We're going to kill people in graphic ways. And I would, as a reader, I would have felt more comfortable if there had been if there had been, we're just crazy people picking people up to do this. It's like, okay, but there are reasons, and I don't think the reasons and the victims match. With this is another one. It's like you need to give me more pages so that I understand this better. And I just did not understand it. I will also say at the end of the book, before more shit goes down, we find out why this is happening. There are a lot of things I don't buy about that. I think the first half of this novel is amazing. I mean, on a novel basis, not as an extreme horror novel as this is just a very good piece of writing. I think it loses its way in the second half. There's, and I do not consider myself religious at all, Captain Agnostic here, but there's some like author intrusions about religion in the last half of the novel, and it's just like I feel like you don't feel you're comfortable enough with letting the story being told there, and you felt like you had to say, well, he prays to God, and what's God doing for him now? And it's like you could have done that without having to going knock, 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 knock. Get my point? Eh, I didn't like that. Other than that, I am continuing to read some of the books that I said I was continuing to read last week. I have progressed quite a bit in some of them and progress just a little bit in some others. And on the 1st of November, started reading A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, which we read every year out loud. Read it between the 1st of November and the 24th of December. So basically, the book that I have, it's like 2 to 3 pages each night. So other than that, I'm done with Guy de Maupassant. I'm reading extreme horror. I'm reading A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, and I'm watching Hallmark Christmas movies. So please like and subscribe, leave a comment, and I will talk to you next time.